Dr. Ken Landau. Thanks for watching. Let's talk about Ginkgo Biloba, or simply Ginkgo. It's a very commonly used dietary supplement, herbal supplement. It's from the fossil tree, the maidenhair tree, the Japanese silver apricot. It's a living fossil, actually. Ginkgo species were identified as early as the Jurassic era, more than 250 million years ago, with Ginkgo Biloba being the sole surviving member of the Ginkgoaceae family. Ginkgo is among the top 5 herbal supplements. Actually, the dietary supplement market itself sells more than $39 billion of product every single year. Sales of memory supplements, of which Ginkgo is one, are dramatically increasing in spite of the fact they only account for about 2% of the total supplement market. The number of supplements on the market in 1994 was about 4,000. Now it's more than 80,000. What is Ginkgo used for? Well, supposedly Ginkgo is a product that might help dementia or forgetfulness or memory loss, might improve brain function, delay the effects of aging on the brain, treat headaches and dizziness and ringing in the ears or tinnitus, treat hearing problems, difficult time concentrating, improve your memory, improve your circulation if you have peripheral arterial disease, treat your asthma or your bronchitis, prevent macular degeneration, treat anxiety or depression or the tardive dyskinesia that might come along with taking Zyprexa or Seroquel or similar drugs, treat schizophrenia and sexual dysfunction. Where do you purchase the product? Well, you can get it through health food stores or mail order. You can get it multi-level marketing organizations, grocery stores and pharmacies, and the internet. The plant itself is native to central China. It's highly adaptable. It's a hardy tree. It's dioecious. That means there are separate male trees and female trees. Tree begins reproducing after it's been growing for about 20 years. The female tree produces fruit that has a distinct bad odor. The leaf itself is unique. It's bilobed. It's been used in traditional Chinese medicine for centuries, grown in China, centrally of course, and also in France and the United States and South Carolina, more so than in Australia and Korea, Japan, and New Zealand. It's dietary supplement available as a tablet or a capsule or a tea or a cosmetic or a powder of the dry leaf or as an extract or a tincture, extract with acetone or the tincture with ethanol. You can buy Ginkgo either by itself or combined with other herbs. The leaves contain a complex mixture of components, and the exact formulation varies over time and manufacturer, but there's a major discrepancy between what's on the label and what's actually in the bottle. We have a legal definition of what these supplements contain through the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act in 1994. It's important to realize that in the United States, the supplements are regulated completely differently than other medicines. So they're not regulated by the FDA like they do the over-the-counter medicines or the prescription medicines. Actually, the federal law does not require the supplements to go through the same safety and efficacy testing that any other chemical that you consume goes through prior to its marketing. They simply rely on the word of the manufacturer. Well, that's why you see on all of the supplements the admonition that the product is not meant to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease because it hasn't been tested. And because it hasn't been tested, you have to be very careful giving the product to infants or pregnant women or women who are breastfeeding. And if you're taking the Ginkgo, you ought to stop it at least 24, 48 hours before you undergo surgery because it might interfere with the coagulation process. Now, some people use the product as food, especially the seeds. They're regularly consumed in Japan and Korea and China, despite poisoning from the seeds, gastrointestinal distress and irritability, and even grand mal seizures because the seeds contain potentially toxic material, cyanide actually, cyanogenic glycosides. They're potentially poisonous. They can lead to serious allergic reactions and bleeding and the serotonin syndrome. In order to make sense of all of this, in Germany, a physician, Dr. Wilmar Schwabe III, 1965, he developed a method of extraction, a standardized method of extraction, and he developed what's known as EGB 761. That's the international standard for Ginkgo. And it was subsequently marketed by Nature's Way as Ginkgold, and it combines many different components in a unique concentration. So it's standardized to contain 24% of the flavone glycosides. That includes the quercetin and the camphorol and the isoramnane, and 6% of the terpene lactones, 3% the ginkgolides and 3% the bilobalide, and then contains a variety of other substances as well, like the flavanols and the bioflavones that include the catechins, epicatechins, and gallocatechins, and the proanthocyanidins, and the alkylphenols, and the phenolic acids, a whole bunch of other products, but also a little bit of ginkgotoxin, a toxin, a ginkgolic acid, that has negative effect. Fortunately, it's mostly in the seeds and not so much in the leaves, but we can analyze the substance because while none of the products are unique to the ginkgo except for the bilobalide and the ginkgolide, and those can be analyzed, and it can be analyzed fingerprinted so that it bypasses some of the methods that people use to adulterate the product. So you can see whether you're actually getting the correct product. Well, the leaves are harvested only when the flavanol concentration is at its maximum. And when the leaves are dried, they lose about 75% of the weight. Then they're further extracted with acetone and water in a 6:4 ratio. And then that's concentrated, and that's the product that's used. Now, sometimes it's used with an ethanol extraction. So you need a large quantity of leaves to produce a small quantity of product, and that's why unscrupulous manufacturers substitute inexpensive buckwheat extract or the extract of other plants, and then they add chemicals that can fool some of the simple tests for ginkgo. That's why you need some special testing. Well, the chemical constituents obviously vary significantly depending on the conditions of growth and the time of the harvest. How does it work? Well, no well-established method, no really good basic studies, but some of the thoughts, and the thoughts are common to so many different kinds of products. It's thought to work on the platelet activating factor, work as an antioxidant, scavenge reactive oxygen radicals or radical species, or chelate metal products, or work on glutathione transferase, or change the concentration of neurotransmitters or their receptors, or alter the nitric oxide release, or inhibit the mitochondrial dysfunction, or maybe work on some of the enzymes in the liver, or alter the way amyloid aggregates. Well, all of that's fine, but how does it work in the person? Interestingly, a study was performed. It was printed in the Journal of the American Medical Association, or JAMA, in November of 2008. It was called the Ginkgo Evaluation of Memory Study. And this study was the largest non-industry funded study. So when industry studies the product, when industry funds the product, funds the study, then the likelihood of the study turning out positive is relatively high. When the government organizations, they don't really have a vested interest. It's whatever the product shows. So the largest non-industry funded study looked at individuals who were recruited by advertising. These were not people who were in clinic and who were under treatment for anything. They were from the community mailing lists and voter registration lists. The study was carried out at the University of Pittsburgh, Wake Forest University, Johns Hopkins University, and University of California, Davis, funded by the National Institutes of Health, National Institutes of Aging, the complementary and alternative medicine branch of the NIH. And what they did is they studied for about 6 years people who were over age 75, average age 79 at entry, about 3,000 individuals, normal cognition or minimal cognitive impairment at the onset of the study. These people did not suffer from depression. They did not have psychoses. They weren't on any antipsychotic drugs. They had normal thyroid function. Their kidneys worked okay. They had no Parkinson's disease. They weren't taking warfarin. So what happened after 6 years of taking ginkgo compared to a placebo? Well, if we look at any type of dementia, the likelihood of developing any type of dementia in people taking the ginkgo was 18%. It was only 16% in the people taking the placebo. So in other words, the likelihood of dementia was 11% less in people taking placebo than in people taking the ginkgo. How about Alzheimer's disease specifically? Well, ginkgo, 17%, placebo, 14%. In other words, people taking placebo were 15% less likely to develop dementia than people who were taking the ginkgo. So if we look at all-cause dementia, people taking ginkgo, 12% more likely to develop dementia. Alzheimer's disease, people taking ginkgo were 16% more likely to develop dementia. People likely to progress from mild cognitive impairment to Alzheimer's disease, 13% more likely if they took ginkgo than if they took a placebo. And the people taking the ginkgo had an increased incidence of hemorrhagic stroke and no reduction in the incidence of cardiovascular disease. Well, other studies, meta-analysis, looked at about 6,000 individuals, no change in the rate of development of dementia between ginkgo and placebo. Another meta-analysis in 2012 showed the same thing, no difference whether you took placebo or took ginkgo. 2007, again, the same thing, no difference. Looked at blood pressure, no difference. Macular degeneration, no difference. Polymyositis, no difference. European Medicines Agency, they looked at ginkgo, and their chairman, Werner Noss from Germany, they evaluated the product. In 2015, they came to the conclusion that ginkgo could be used to improve age-related cognitive impairment and quality of life in adults with mild dementia, but they based their conclusion simply on the long-standing use, not on any specific medical study or medical evaluation. But they said that you should use it only after any serious medical condition was excluded. For evidence, they used studies that were more than 50 years old, that were funded by the industry, and principally relied on established use and traditional use. Didn't really have any significant clinical trials. Well, the European Medical Association or Medical Agency, what they did was they say, if you're taking the medicine, taking the product, and you're doing it for dementia, and if the dementia worsens or you don't have any improvement after 3 months, you ought to stop it. And if you're taking it for circulatory problems, and you've been doing it for 2 months and you're not getting better, or if you're getting worse, you ought to stop and see your doctor. Well, in spite of the fact that the European Medicines Agency, the EMA, said it's okay to use the product, there was significant objection by health ministers from Spain and Finland and France and Greece and Italy and Iceland and the Netherlands and Sweden and the United Kingdom. They all said, no, there's no legitimate use for this product. Germany, the product is an ethical medicine. There's a monograph that's composed by Commission E and was set up by the Federal Institute of Health in Germany, and they say that there's potential benefit, but only if the symptoms are associated with psychopathologic features. And actually, they relied on 2 studies that weren't even done in Western medicine. So Ginkgo Biloba is sold in the United States as a dietary supplement. In Germany, it's an over-the-counter medicine and a prescription medicine licensed by Commission E. They say it's safe and efficacious, and it contains the Schwabe formula, the EGB 761, with the 22 to 27% flavone glycosides and the 5 to 7% terpene lactones and less than 5 parts per million of the ginkgolic acid. As far as the safety is concerned, well, in the study that I mentioned where the government funded it, there was no difference in the incidence of adverse effects between the ginkgo and the placebo. Seems to be safe in moderate amounts. Some people can develop mild headache or nausea or constipation or abdominal cramps. Some people develop dizziness or allergic reactions, but there might be some problems with bleeding. Some people spontaneously bleed, some people, especially if they're taking aspirin or other anticoagulants, antiplatelet agents, they can bleed into the eye and the nose and the brain and the joints, especially if you also add some ginger or some garlic or some ginseng. Some people even develop some palpitations or allergic skin reactions like poison ivy. There are isolated cases where people who take the ginkgo, who have high blood pressure, and are taking thiazides get worse, or some people develop coma if they happen to be taking trazodone with the ginkgo. And in people taking ginkgo who had previously well-controlled seizures, sometimes the seizures start to act up again. The typical dose is about 120 to 240, even up to 300 milligrams in divided doses throughout the course of the day. The flavonoid glycosides have a half-life of about 4.5 hours. The bilobalide and the ginkolide have a half-life of about 2 hours. There's some evidence that they might cross the blood-brain barrier. Interestingly, the National Cancer Institute said, hey, if people are taking all these kind of drugs, what's the short-term, long-term effect of exposure to them? They asked the National Toxicology Program here in the country to evaluate the product. So the ginkgo was studied in rats and mice for 2 years. They received treatment for up to about 105 weeks. And it was found that those animals receiving the ginkgo were at higher risk for developing thyroid cancer, liver cancer, leukemia, and abnormalities of the nasal mucosa. So then the American Botanical Council and the American Herbal Pharmacopoeia and the University of Missouri, so a combination of industry groups and universities, came out in 2018 and noted that there was economically motivated adulteration of ginkgo extracts. And they noted that that's an ongoing problem in the dietary supplement industry. And they noted that the quality of the supplements has declined ever since 1999. So some of the adulterants might be the pure flavanols or the flavanol glycoside extracts that are improper, not using acetone or ethanol. But in China, actually, they found some of the manufacturers were using 3% hydrochloric acid. That meant that the product didn't contain any quercetin or camphorol or isoramnine. Now, the cost of the EGB 761, if you buy a pound of it, would be about $100 for a pound. Buckwheat is less than $5 a pound. And some of the adulterants contain chromium or lead or arsenic. So in an evaluation of the product available in the United Kingdom, they found that 74% contained adulterants or even no ginkgo at all. In Germany, basically the same thing. Canada, basically the same thing. So the Government Accounting Office, the GAO, here in the United States, in October of 2018, they tested a product that was labeled as ultra pure ginkgo. Said it would enhance the memory and the brain function. And right on the label said it was verified by high performance liquid chromatography. And you know what? When it was tested, it didn't contain any ginkgo at all, contained other products, some of which were unidentified. Now, a nationally recognized testing company, the consumerlab.com, they say finding real ginkgo isn't very easy. And many of the products, more than half of the products, failed the test. And if you look at products that do pass the test, the cost of the ginkgo, equivalent amounts, anywhere from 9 cents to more than $2 per unit. The Center for Science and the Public Interest, they urge consumers to avoid the supplements with Ginkgo Biloba. They say they're often adulterated. They don't even contain the ginkgo, oftentimes. Consumer Reports says save your money. It says it's not going to help prevent or treat Alzheimer's disease. The Journal of Pharmacy and Pharmacology, they say most of the tested products don't meet the specifications. And if we look at reproductive studies, none done in humans, and in mice we find abnormalities of the chromosomes in the testes, and we find decreased pregnancy, we find greater pre-implantation loss of fertilized eggs. So that's the story of ginkgo. It's a very popular herb, been around for hundreds of millions of years, but in spite of investigations, principally from the industry, less so from governmental agency, we still don't have any good use for the product. Good percent of the products actually don't even contain the ginkgo at all. And if they do contain something, they contain some arsenic and some lead and some chromium. But in spite of this, the product is still widely used. So go figure. Anyway, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the show, please tell a friend, consider subscribing so you'll be notified when we post new videos. And anyway, appreciate your interest. I'm Dr. Ken Landau.